So again, welcome to everyone and thanks for coming tonight. I'm Dean Wright. My colleague Ron Judd and I will be moderating this discussion. Tonight, we'll hear from the candidates running for Whatcom County Council. And next Saturday, the candidates for Bellingham City Council will join us. Same time, same place. So why are we here? It's an understatement to say that political discourse in this country has become more polarized and vitriolic than in the memory of anyone in this room. A New York Times poll this week found that only 1/3 of Americans have faith in America's political system to solve problems. That's down 20 points from 5 years ago. And sometimes it seems in Washington, the other Washington, that there's no real debate, just shouting at each other and past each other. It's easy to lose hope. But we don't live in the other Washington. We live here in Cascadia. And here we're blessed with a more functional and civil discourse. And we're blessed with office holders and candidates who believe in the ability of government to solve problems. And they believe in the power and the wisdom of voters. And they're dedicated to promoting a more civil discourse. That's what this evening is about. While the candidates you will meet have some sharp disagreements, we believe this discussion will generate more light than heat. And that's why we at Cascadia Daily News are sponsoring this event and next week's event. Because even if we lose faith in the other Washington to face up to our problems, here in Cascadia we believe, we know we can make a difference. And that's why a well-informed electorate is so important. It's what our election coverage is all about. And it's a reminder of the importance of a functional and vital local news media. Because when local journalism fails, democracy fails. Now, a word about the process tonight. I'm going to introduce the candidates who will each give a short opening statement. Then our executive editor, Ron Judd, will lead a discussion with the candidates, which will be unscripted and as organic as possible. And you'll have a chance to ask questions. Now, as we've done in previous forums, we're using a tool called Slido to manage questions from the audience. Then you can enter your question and submit it. And our digital editor, J.F. Flannery, will monitor the questions for repetition and relevance and surface them to me. I'll get to as many as I can. And we'll take a short break halfway through the program. Now, let's meet your candidates for Whatcom County Council. First, for the at-large seat, please welcome Barry Buchanan.
An awesome opportunity to hear from us tonight about kind of our vision for Whatcom County. I'm Barry Buchanan, and I'm running for re-election to the at-large position A seat. And I'm a fourth-generation Whatcom County native. I have found that public service is in my roots. I spent 7 years in the United States Navy, and then when I came home, I went to work in my neighborhood as a neighborhood association president for the lettered streets here in Bellingham. Then I ran for Bellingham City Council, was elected, served one term, and then really felt my passion was with the county. That's where my grandparents settled here out on the Lawrence Road near Everson. So I'm here to ask for your support this year. It's going to be an awesome forum, I think. I think you're going to get to know us all, and you're going to see exactly what Dean said. Whatcom and Cascadia, we care about each other, and our greatest resource we have, folks, are each other. And that's the same way with all of our candidates. You're going to hear from a lot of great people tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. Now, please welcome Barry's opponent, Misty Flowers.
evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's great to see so many people. I'm Misty Flowers, and I'm running for Whatcom County Council at large to bring fresh leadership and new ideas or creative solutions to help fix some of the real big challenges we face. So I've been in Whatcom County since 2002, and I came to this place because of the amazing, incredible natural beauty along with this incredible community that is very diverse and full of life and full of abundance, and just the way that you all come together and have since I've been involved in this community has just been huge. I would be honored to get your support and look forward to this evening tonight. I hope that reach out to us afterwards if you have more questions than we can answer this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Misty. And for the District 2 County Council seat, please welcome Maya Morales. You're working.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Maya Morales, and I'm running for Whatcom County Council for District 2. I have the pleasure of currently serving as a Whatcom County Charter Review Commissioner for our district. And in this year, I have done exactly what I promised in this role and really showed up to protect and expand our rights and fight for our futures. I'm running for County Council because I am tired of knocking on doors where people are struggling. Folks are struggling to pay rent, they're struggling to afford groceries, struggling to afford childcare. Young folks are struggling with, wow, do I even have a future on this planet? And what is that? And what does it look like? And so I'm excited to get to work again for our county for the next 4 years. And thank you so much for considering my candidacy. I also want to let folks know that I am our first candidate in Whatcom County to be endorsed by the Working Families Party. You may have heard of Working Families Party on the news. We have a pretty famous candidate for the mayor of New York City right now. And so that's really exciting. And I'm looking forward to bringing that kind of energy through the rest of this campaign. Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you, Maya. Now, please welcome Maya's opponent, Elizabeth Boyle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out and spending your Saturday night with us. My name's Elizabeth Boyle. I'm excited to be running for County Council District 2. It's my first time for my name on the ballot, which makes it extra exciting and fun. Thank you for your all the support you've lent to our campaign so far. My husband and I moved to Whatcom County 25 years ago. For the first 20 years, I was a small business owner. We had 2 kids during that time, which is very exciting, and one of my sons is with me tonight. Also during those years, I was really active in our school, just learning a lot about what's possible. We all come together to make things happen. And then the last 5 years, I was spending a lot of time with a local nonprofit working on the opioid fentanyl crisis, youth mental health, housing, and working on tribal-led environmental advocacy. And all those experiences, both as a business owner and with local nonprofits, was all about collaboration. I want to bring that spirit of collaboration to the County Council and see what we can do to collectively make Whatcom County a more welcoming, more affordable place for everyone. Thank you so much for having us here tonight.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Now let's move to District 3. Please welcome Kyle Christensen.
Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see a lot of people. I'm Kyle Christensen, running for Whatcom County Council, District 3. I'm running because I've been serving the community for almost a decade. I was the mayor of Sumas during the 3 big floods, so I got a lot more than I signed up for. But through that time, I was able to provide, trusted and proven leadership. The other parts of that job that I enjoyed was we actually were able to bring a lot of businesses into Sumas. So I think that I'm going to take that same energy as we look at the housing situation that we have, where the cost to live and work in Whatcom County continues to go up, and we need those family wage jobs, and we need to have affordable housing. So I'm happy to have the endorsement of the Whatcom County Association of Realtors because I have some ideas on how we can get more affordable housing. And there's things we can do with zoning, with how we build, and with also how we build that infrastructure out to a lot of the urban growth areas. So I'm excited to talk more about that. Hopefully some of the questions allow for that. I also have the endorsements of all the small city mayors in my area. So I believe that that will help, you know, the voters decide, hey, if the mayors support me, then I hope that it will resonate with the voters as well. So I'm just happy to be here and look forward to tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And now please welcome Kyle's opponent, Jessica Renstrom.
Where we live should not determine how well we live. My name is Jessica Reenstra. I'm a nurse practitioner, a small business owner, and one of your elected charter review commissioners. As a healthcare provider, I have seen over and over again how the social drivers of health, like affordable housing, reliable transportation, good jobs, and access to care, including women's reproductive health care, truly shape our experience and how we have opportunities to well-being in our county. For decades, I've been serving in healthcare and systems management, and I've learned many times over and over again that how we solve tough problems is by working together. That's why I'm really proud to have the endorsements of leaders at every level. Congressman Rick Larson, Senator Sharon Shoemake, Representatives Rule, Rammel, and Timmons, County Council members Galloway, Donovan, Buchanan, and Scanlon, and the sovereign nations of Nooksack and Lummi. They know that I will lead with integrity, accountability, and compassion. Collaboration is how we work together and take care of one another, and that's how I'll lead on the county.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks to all of you for your opening statements. And now, to lead tonight's discussion, we're joined by my friend and colleague, Cascadia Daily News Executive Editor, Ron Judd.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for being here. It's nice to see so many faces. I want to say a couple quick thank yous. One for Seaholm High School, Go Mariners, and the Bellingham School District for this wonderful facility, which we like to use for town halls, and they've been a really great new feature for us at CDN. And I want to thank all the candidates for being here, and not just for being here, but this campaign has been really well conducted, I think, and civil and really interesting. And we've met with every one of these candidates in our own offices for endorsements, interviews, and interviews with our reporters, and they've been super helpful, and that's critical, so thank all of you guys. And I also want to say a quick thanks to all of my colleagues at CDN. Raise your hand if you're here from CDN, work for the CDN. For helping make an informed electorate even more informed. And thanks to all of you for being here. We couldn't do what we do without you. Well, we could, but it wouldn't be nearly as interesting or fun. We'd get boring really fast talking to ourselves. So thank you for supporting CDN and supporting local news. This is going to be sort of a different style forum, I hope, and not as scripted as some of the ones that you may have seen. We don't have a timer for answers. I've asked the candidates to keep their answers to questions to a minute or two, and then I'll start fidgeting and making noises or something, and hopefully not have to cut anyone off. But we have a lot of interesting questions, some of them submitted by you as readers through our Citizens Agenda process. Thanks for everybody for participating in that. That helps guide us. And oddly enough, a lot of the questions you ask are ones that we also think of, which is nice that we're kind of on the same page in a lot of ways, but there's also ones that surprise us every year. And some that surprise us that show up every year, like Peace Health and things like that, issues that are sort of perennial. But that's a really helpful process for us. So I wanted to just start off by not a lighthearted question, I guess. It's talking about the jail or Justice Center. as it's known. We have two candidates on the stage here who are not running against each other. But one thing that struck me in our interviews with all you folks is a couple candidates here have questions about the process of building a jail and how we split up the jail versus doing treatment programs. It's a very big issue. It's the biggest, I think, capital construction project the county's ever undertaken. Major tax-funded initiative. And we have a candidate here who was very much involved in that process and setting that up. And at least one candidate I know who thinks maybe it should be done a little bit differently. So I want to ask Barry to lead off talking about the Justice Center project, and then how committed is that process, and is it locked in stone the way it is? And then I think another candidate, maybe Maya, could weigh in on, you had some thoughts about this during the campaign that were really interesting. So you want to start us out, Barry?
I will. Oh, I have my own mic, that's true. Well, thanks for that question, John. Ron, this has been something that I've been focused on really heavily for the last 3 to 4 to 5 years. If you remember right, the 2015 and 2017 ballot measures were both defeated. The 17 even defeated worse than the 2015 one. So I knew that we had to do something different. I knew that that the proposal wasn't right for the community, and B, it was never ever vetted through the community. There was no community process at all. So I formed a committee, the Whatcom County Council's Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee, and we went on a listening tour to 7 locations throughout the county to find the values of everyone out there and ask them why they voted the way they did. And we found without question across all the political spectrum, geographical spectrum, people were interested in treatment over punishment whenever possible. There needs to be accountability, don't get me wrong, but there needs to be a way to rehabilitate people to get them through the system and back into life and not punish them for addiction or behavioral health issues. So we, once we did the listening tour, we put together a stakeholder advisory committee that did a needs assessment over the course of a year. That was 2023, excuse me. And then 2022. And then 2023 is when we took the values that came out of the needs assessment and actually developed an implementation plan that gave real projects, on-the-ground projects that would satisfy those values. It was a very transparent process. Every single one of the meetings over the course of that year and a half prior to the ballot measure were done as public meetings with public comment available, and I'm talking almost 18 months worth of meetings. We invited the press to come to those meetings, although they were invited through the system, but we wanted to make sure that people were able to get the word out. So where we are in the process now, we've selected the design build team. It's under the new progressive design build concept where the designer and the actual construction are one team. So the designers and the builders can have the most relevant information passed back and forth to each other. So right now there's a town hall actually planned for November 20th. You can put that on your calendar. It's going to be in Ferndale. That's going to be the first one we hold. So there's going to be a series of 3 of those throughout, starting in November and then throughout 2026. There'll be one in Linden and then one here in Bellingham. So we're trying to get the word out where the process is, and I think it's going along well. We haven't had to compromise any of our values at all. And one of the reasons I'm running for re-election this time is to make sure that we keep the promises that we made to the voters when we put this out for the vote.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good introduction. Let's just go down the line here, and maybe the rest of you candidates, since you'll all deal with this issue, can answer the simple question. Are you committed to seeing that project through sort of with the scope and manner that it's proceeding now? And if not, why not? Misty.
Yeah, I think it's a really big issue, and it has been brought to the voters, and it's very clear that we need both the jail, but we also do need the mental health services. I think that a lot of people are really frustrated by the lack of movement on either front, and we're seeing the effects of not having enough support for mental health and recovery services. So what I would like to see is sooner than later us really set up some mental health and recovery support so that we can help reduce recidivism as we build out the jail. One of the things I would really love to see is an inpatient treatment center here in Whatcom County, because people currently have to go out of our county to get support for inpatient treatment. There's a lot of people that really want support and they don't want to leave Whatcom County to get that. I also think that there's something to be said that sometimes what people do need when they are stuck in that cycle of addiction and abuse and criminal activity is sometimes they do need to be incarcerated, even if for a short period, to give them enough opportunity and clarity that they can reach for those support services that we're providing. This is something very dear to my heart, as one of my family members struggles with fentanyl addiction and homelessness right now. So I see it as a major issue that we have, and I hope that we can start addressing it sooner than later and not wait for several years before we start that project.
Maya.
So many thoughts about this. For starters, I should say that I tend to be someone, particularly as an elected, but as someone who looks at policy and advocacy and the way that that impacts community, I tend to be someone that looks at the overall context and not just sort of head in the sand. Project 2025 was passed in January of 2022. At that time, we saw countless legislative bills sweep across our nation that reignited a war on drugs, reignited a push for more mass incarceration, and really reignited a lot of antagonism against poor people and folks who were unhoused. And we've seen that play out over the last several years. And so I sort of put our jail project into that context. I think it would almost be irresponsible in this particular year, given the last 9 months, that we've seen not to. And so please take my answer within that context. I really understand that when we pass something to voters and we give them a plan and they vote on it, we need to enact it, right? Legally, that's what we have to do. And so in terms of the way that plan was written, there have been arguments that it was a transparent process, community was involved. I think it would probably be inaccurate to say that it was a completely unified and 100% consensus-based process. There were many, many hundreds of community members who came to public comment over and over and asked for the plan that went to voters to be different. And so I do think it's important to acknowledge that. At the same time as we have to take responsibility as folks running for council to go ahead and enact in the most responsible and compassionate and humane way what was enacted, we don't have a lot of choices there. So we do need to make sure that people are receiving care, and there's a huge need for folks to receive that care. I also want to say that I support pre-arrest diversion, and that is not something we have, because every single data point that we have over decades shows us that addiction is not something that you can control carcerally. People who go into a carceral setting in detox are much more likely to overdose the moment they get out. And so there's tons of data to support that some of the decisions that we made in this project are actually not data-driven, they're not fact-based, and they won't really serve our community members in the best possible way. At the same time, we're gonna have to do our best with what we've got, right? And I'm aware that we're living in reality. I, as someone who is running for council, will do everything I can to reduce harm in every possible way to every member of our community. And that's my position on this.
Thank you. I think this is a subject that's coming up in almost every conversation we're having these days. And when I think of this, the Justice Project, it's not just the jail and the behavioral health services, but really looking at the whole continuum of care. How can we move this conversation upstream? How can we be investing in our youth? Thinking about the Healthy Children's Fund and investing when children are born, all the way from day one, all the way through their youth. I do a lot of work around youth mental health. How can we wrap our arms around those youth when they're needing support with mentoring and free third spaces? And then if a crime occurs, how can we think about all the different possibilities that exist? How can we think about meaningful diversion, programs that, is jail really the right option for this individual for healing? And hopefully the jail is the last resort. But if someone serves time in jail, how can we make sure some of those funds from the Justice Project are meaningfully attributed to reentry? Some of my favorite work I've done these days, some of the best relationships I've had over the last couple of years, are one-on-one relationships with people that have served time in our jail. And time again, they talk about the importance of having solid housing when they enter. our society again? What about inpatient treatment right when they leave jail, or second chance employment? So I think that's on all of us to create a community that takes care of kids all the way from when they're born and all the way through life continuum. So to me, the Justice Project is so much more than the jail and behavioral health services. But for sure, as a council member, those are all my priorities, and specifically to make sure that 50% is allocated to the behavioral health dollars that we promised. Thank you.
So I believe this is a big issue that we've been talking about in Whatcom County for many years. And so I do see the urgency to move forward. And like the other candidates have said, I do believe that we need both. We need incarceration, and we also need diversion programs. I spent 7 years as a deputy in Oregon, and I saw firsthand how valuable it was to have diversion programs like a work release center or a sheriff's work crew, things like that, to help inmates to really get that confidence to be able to transition after they get and serve their time out of jail. And I think that that's an important thing that we don't often talk about is, we see, yes, we know they need to get rehabilitated, but there's a lot of good programs out there. And so I believe we need to be looking at it as we need both. And even when it comes to addiction, we know with addiction and mental health, there is that recurring. We would see a lot of people that would get out of a jail one night and they'd be back the next shift that we would come in as deputies. And so it's really on my heart to find ways to improve that. And we were able to see a lot of good things, but it just reinforces the need to have both and do them well. And so again, we still are waiting for preliminary numbers. Like these discussions are very early because, as we've heard, they're still trying to develop a plan. So yes, we need both, but we still don't even know what those numbers look like. So we need to keep pushing because this needs to be taken care of as soon as possible. Not just for the safety of the people in our communities, but also to help rehabilitate people. So I see that both are very important. Yeah, so I'm Kyle Christensen.
Yeah, I'm Jessica Rienstra, and a lot of really important stuff has already been said. But again, there was a promise made to the voters that 50% of this money was going to go to behavioral health. And that's accountability that the government should hold to utilize that funding. I also think it's important to ask the question, what are our goals as a community? We know the recidivism where folks continue to cycle back through jail over and over again without access to services for addiction treatment or for behavioral health services. We could keep paying money there. We could make sure we have so many beds that we can always have them available so people can just keep coming back every time they go out, fail to access services, and then come back in. Or we could look at the evidence and we could look at the data and we could ensure that we're offering as many resources as possible. So we're giving our community members the opportunity for success to reintegrate into society with the supports that they need so that they can be good friends and neighbors. So I think that we have to really push and we have to ask, how do we want to be spending this money and why? And what do we want our community to look like? And that's a discussion for all of us to be having together.
Good answers, thank you. Obviously an important project. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit and talk about, in the news lately, we've had a lot of the news about the council has been about the council and the county executive's office and the administration and how they all work together or do not at times. And so I want to ask, the unfortunate outcome of that is it's sort of become a standing little funny thing in the newsroom that we every other week produce a story that has a photo of Todd Donovan and a headline that says, "We were left in the dark." So if people on the council do feel often left in the dark, that's a problem, it seems like. So I want to ask you guys, what, as a council member, would you do to turn the lights on in that room to where everybody's working on the same page? And that could be, this council is obviously going to change. We have new people coming on the council. And what approach would you bring to your job or your current approach to relating with the county executive and staff in a way that is more streamlined? Anybody want to take this on first? Misty?
Sure.
So it's a great question. I think a lot of us are really frustrated by the lack of accountability and transparency, especially in the executive office. It's been an ongoing concern that many community members have come to the council over and over asking for a budget, asking for transparency. We have a couple lawsuits that are now sitting on the table. So one of the things that I would do would be definitely increasing communication within the council and between the council and the executive office. And then also just informing the public so that we can all be informed and make sure that we are holding our elected officials accountable across the board.
Anyone else? Barry?
Yeah, this is a great question. One of the, how this really boiled up was the case, the sexual harassment case against the Public Works Director and the council's non-knowledge of a large settlement between the risk pool and the county. And the code reads very ambiguous, but I don't believe it says that the executive's office doesn't need to inform the council. But what we are doing is clarifying that code, and that's going to be coming through the system real soon, like in the next month or so, to clarify that when any of the settlements hit, the council needs to be involved. If it's an executive session, it's important that we know, we don't read about it, no offense, in the press. Because that is startling when you hear these kinds of things in the press. And then the other one was just about the budget and the non-release of quarterly reports. We had to really harp, and we just did it in public meetings. We didn't have to do any documents or anything to get budget reports regularly, quarterly reports. And then the last item would be just the daily interactions and how we inform each other of each other's work. It's really important to have that close relationship. Even though sometimes it feels adversarial, we are trying to accomplish the same thing and service the public. So just takes a little patience on both sides, but we need to be diligent about demanding that kind of transparency and openness from the executive office.
Kyle, you've probably dealt with county administration and public works people on a regular basis. What's your relationship been with that level of government here, and how would you make it work better?
So it kind of goes back to my days as mayor, and collaboration always wins. When you have transparency with the council, then you can move forward with good decisions and a good vision. But when there is a divide between the executive branch and the legislative branch, like we're seeing, then it becomes more of a friction, and then it becomes more of an accountability issue rather than just sharing and being up to date on providing the information that should be provided to the legislative branch, who is actually approving contracts and things like that. So it's not just enough that it's in the budget, but a lot of those contracts actually come to the council to get voted on, and then the executive branch does that. So I think really there needs to be some more scrutiny and accountability, and in saying, okay, if you're not providing reports, how are we going to be approving these other contracts? And so I really believe that there has to be that working together instead of apart. And we've seen it throughout any government agency. When you have this, instead of working hand in hand, then this is where you end up. And so I really feel like part of the county council person's job is to ask for accountability and transparency. And even though it doesn't happen each month, you still stay on it. You don't give up, because that's where you really get change. And that's why, for you guys to show up here to actually hear this is the part of it, is holding elected officials accountable. If they were voted into an office, whether it's the executive, county council, we all have a job to do. And it's not always fun, it's not always easy, but you have to work hard at it, and you can't give up, because that's what people are elected to do.
Maya, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. I know a little something about being relentless as well. I will say this came into play for us, and I see some of my charter review commissioners are here on our charter review commission this year, and this was a big topic, and both Barry and Misty, and actually also Kyle, brought up issues that we wrestled with. Balance of power issues, transparency issues, and we brought forward actually a whole host of things that are on your ballot to try to help with this. And so I think that I would say for personally, just having experienced my side of that, certainly not on the council, but in a legislative body and working with that staff and sort of being around a lot of these issues that came up for us, I think it's very much about enacting what we did, proper structures of accountability and making sure that our charter is set up in a way that builds that in so that regardless of who is serving in an executive or a council role, that framework is there. And I think we did a good job of that. We brought some amendments to change the budgeting process and draw it out further and require transparency. We put in fiscal reviews. We put in Colton, I see you in the audience, brought forward an amendment to create an office of the ombuds so that whenever there are folks who work in our county government who are not getting anywhere in terms of either whistleblowing or a harassment claim or any kind of issue that may come up, that they have an independent office to go to seek redress. And so that was really important as well, and you'll have that on your November ballot. But I also think that it's an issue of relationships and building. Are you hearing like a weird buzzing from my mic? I'm feeling like okay. Sorry about that, y'all. It's also a question of really just building open channels and setting up an expectation. But I will say, we may not always have that with our particular executive that we elect and our particular council members. And so I think creating that framework and structure for accountability is really key. I know that's part of the reason I brought forward some of the amendments I brought. One of them was a transparency amendment. Another one was town halls. I think that just the more interaction that we have with everyday folks and with, among council and executive staff, I think that'll be great. There is also an amendment out there that would have allowed council members, and I don't know that, I don't know which way it's going to go. I have no prediction on this, to hire staff and share staff members so that they actually have their own staff. So there's also issues there of trust, clearly, in that kind of an amendment, where there was a desire on the part of the council to see their own dedicated staff members. And I don't know which way that'll go on our ballot. We'll see what voters do with that.
Elizabeth, you want to weigh in on this? Looking from the outside.
Well, I just was thinking about the trust piece. And, I'm so grateful that we have public comment during county council meetings, but I don't think we should expect that's the only time that we hear from our constituents. I think it's upon us as an elected leader to go out into the community and be really intentional about listening to people and learning from them, that we should be going out to the tribes and strengthening those relationships, meeting with our unions, meeting with students and seniors, but being really intentional about going out to them, hearing from them, and getting them more civically engaged in the process. Because the higher the civic engagement is in our community, the healthier our community will be. So I love that all these systems are going to be in place, and then we just need to make sure people know about them and take advantage of them and be part of this process with us. It'll make everybody, it'll make a much healthier process for everyone.
The other side of that coin, obviously, is the public expectations for your own jobs as council members, and those seem to rise all the time as we sort of shift between a little sleepy sort of medium-sized city to a big, rapidly growing city and county. There are a lot of people headed our way. I'd like to know from each of you, do you consider in your own mind this job a full-time job? Let's start with Jessica.
Absolutely. I'm really glad this has been a discussion that whether they meant to or not, they're having right now at the council level. I see it similar to the work that I do as a healthcare provider. The job never stops. You will never get to the end of the task list. You will never heal everyone, although we really want to. And so I think understanding what the expectation is, what the budget allows for, and then finding the fit to that, are we accomplishing enough? Are we getting enough things done? From the discussions that I've had with multiple council members, current and past, this is something that they would like to see happen, that it would make sense for this to be a full-time job because the work never stops. And I think that leads back to a few other pieces of being able to be out in the community more, building more relationships, and also dedicating that time to add the communication, to have the transparency, and to really do a job with excellence. And whether this is a sleepy community or a really large community, and whether you're in the downtown city, Bellingham, or you're way out where I am in East County, we deserve excellent leadership. We deserve excellence. And I really do think that we can strive for that and accomplish that.
Yeah, so I would say, just so you know, it's public record, like when I was mayor during those 3 floods, I was making $700 a month. So when I compare that to what this position is, I really feel in my own mind that, with our current budget and how, we end up going over budget every year, that I would not push to make this a full-time position. I believe we're paid well enough at what the current rate is for what we do. And I think a lot of it comes down to is just working hard and going the extra mile. And that's on every individual. And I think that's the key. So yeah, that's what I would say is where it currently is, I think is well within the range of wages. And I think it can be done. It just takes determination and effort. And that's what each of you should expect from each one of us is that we're gonna work hard, no matter whether you're getting paid double the amount or the current amount. And so that's the way I would look at it. And like I said, with the way the budget is and revenues are down, we don't need more tax increases. And I would be very careful when we start adding more things to the budget. We really need to prioritize how we're spending our money. And I think a lot of voters like you are looking for accountability and transparency in how your money is spent, because we're going the wrong direction and we have growth coming. And I want my kids to be able to live and work in Whatcom County. That's the most important thing to me. So thank you.
Thank you. I imagine, based on what I've heard from current county council members, that it is really a full-time approach. And for me, it's all about building and strengthening relationships, and that takes a lot of time. And I don't want to shortchange relationships because it shortchanges how I can show up for each of you. And so to me, I'm hoping that it's something I can just embrace every day. I think there's not really a choice. If you're going to do it well, you're all in. So I'm all in.
Guess we're going down the line. Yeah, I think I'm supportive of that. I think there is a difference between, is this considered a full-time thing? Do we need to double the salary? Those are different questions to me. I would certainly do this full-time on its current salary. Like, to be clear, and that's also coming out of a completely unpaid charter review role, right? Where I did recognize that in some ways, I do think that the fact that we were not compensated did change people's level of commitment in terms of time. It may be that if we had been compensated, we would have elected different people, possibly, unclear. And it also may have been that we would have been more committed to lots of committee meetings outside of our regular meetings, right? So I do think that that's correct, that the more that we can consider this a full-time role and support that work, the more we're going to get out of our county council members. And so I do see that that's true. But I certainly would be committing, my full time to this, no matter what.
That's a great question. I definitely am committed to Whatcom County, and I would agree with many of you that this is a part-time position on paper, but it's a full-time job. We have some really big issues that need to be addressed. And I've spent the last 5 years engaging with our public and bringing many concerns from the public to county council meetings and being engaged in many council meetings because it matters to me. So whether I'm getting paid or not, I'm going to keep doing the hard work, and hopefully if I get elected by you, that I will be able to serve in a bigger capacity, doing more work, being able to build stronger relationships, both within our government, but also between Whatcom County and our smaller city governments, because there needs to be more communication so that there can be better representation. So I am all in, 100%.
I've seen this morph from probably my first term. It was a little slightly more than half-time job, maybe 60%, but it quickly escalated into what is now a full-time job. And I'm just to build a little bit about what Misty said, the public is more engaged now than they have been in the past. So that creates a more opportunity for us to engage with the public and go out and do things like the community conversations that we're doing. We just instituted where myself and the other at-large Councilmember Scanlon, and the district person, like for instance, Councilmember Ellenboss and I and Councilmember Scanlon did a town hall style meeting up in Ferndale, and then we did one in Deming, we've done one in Blaine, and we're going to be doing one in Point Roberts. And so the council has found that to be super, super valuable. And sure, it adds time, but that's part of that full-time work. And I think Misty said it, it's on paper, it's a part-time job, but it is definitely a full-time job if you really want to engage and get the work done and really serve the community the way you should.
Good answers, and full-time job seems to be the consensus, and we ask simply that you carve out time to answer calls from reporters whenever possible, because we're trying to help you, help us, help everyone. I want to ask about housing, and housing is a difficult subject, and as journalists, we struggle covering housing, and because there's no simple way to fix housing and affordability and housing all the folks in our community who need housing. And that's countywide. And I think everybody probably agrees on that. There's no easy magic solution, or it would have been done a long time ago. And there are market forces that are immense that affect this. But people have a responsibility to try to do what they can, right? So I want to come at this a little bit different angle. This is a much bigger issue in the city, obviously, than in the county. But in the North County especially, it's probably very relevant. Most of the focus of what government can do and the levers they can pull are in relation to density and zoning and land use. And most of the proposed solutions seem to be, acknowledging the fact that there's going to have to be more density, which nobody really likes. Some people might, but a lot of people don't. And the question is, since that is the lever that is probably going to get pulled here to the person who's come to Bellingham because it has a special character and they have a clear view of the water, or they have a house that they worked their whole life and scraped to save up for and want to stay in. And most of those people are kind of being asked by society and by government, by you folks, you're going to have to scooch over a little bit here in the name of progress. And I'm not going to ask you if that's fair, but I'd like to know what you think about whether you can see that people might think it's not fair, and how do you deal with that? Anybody want to take that on, Elizabeth?
Well, I was doorbelling today, and we had the exact same conversation. So I walked up to a door, and it turns out she was a former customer at our business, and we had this great exchange. It was a lovely person, and she said, "Tell me about what's your platform?" Started talking about housing, and I was saying about density, and she said, ugh. She got really uncomfortable. And she said, right behind here, I love my house. I love this quiet space. And I was like, yeah, I get that. She said, but they're building all these apartment buildings behind us, and they're not allocating parking. And, I had all this laundry list of concerns. And I just was like, yeah, I hear you. And we started talking about okay, but what could transportation look like? What could more public transportation look like? What are the other things that they're bringing to this community? What's the responsibility of the developer to make sure that your needs are being met too? So it was really helpful. I guess it made me think about how can we have some more community conversations, because it is uncomfortable. Here's her, she put all of her money into this home, and she loves it, and she feels like she kind of got a little bait and switch philosophy. And I just on a human-to-human level, you could feel her pain. And yet she goes, because we were also talking about our own house neighbors, she goes, I care about them. It's like, well, then we have to do a little nudging. We have to figure out where we're each willing to give up a little bit. But I realized it made me just think about the power of communication and conversation, so everyone has a chance to learn. If we each just give a little bit, what would that look like for the beauty and health of our entire community? So it was just so funny. I mean, it was exactly what you pictured. But I think that we're going to have to all learn to adjust a little bit and give up a little bit so that we can take care of each other. Mm-hmm.
The density question, I mean, that has been an issue, especially in Bellingham. My neighborhood is a single-family block, and we've done some infill. We've done a couple ADUs on the block, and people were a little resistant to that at first, but they finally caught on. And I think in the county itself, we have opportunities to utilize our urban growth areas throughout the county for growth. And we need to be able to work, the county needs to work with the small cities and the city of Bellingham to really push those entities to build out and annex those urban growth areas that are appropriate, because we can't sit on UGAs forever, or we're not going to be able to grow in a way that's going to be able to produce affordable housing. Now, that's just on kind of the land supply piece. As far as what the county can do, we've done things like we were the last dollars in on a workforce housing project called the Bellis Fair Workhouse. It's for seniors. So there's a lot of seniors out there that are still working, and they need affordable housing as well. So I was proud to be able to have the council pass that at our last meeting. And other things we can do is look at the front end and how streamlining permitting processes could really be beneficial to the home buyer and the renter as well, because they're going to be passing those costs on to the tenant eventually. So clear up some of those barriers that exist and have a nice public process and a stakeholder convening that comes up with some answers on that.
Excuse me, I have to say, as a reporter for like 30, 40 years, I've heard people talking about removing barriers and streamlining the process of building, and they still seems to be barriers. And it finally dawned on me one day that one person's barrier is another person's environmental protection, and there are barriers because, you know, as the public, we've said we have limits on what we're going to do and protect certain things that we value. And I'm interested in any thoughts on that question, Maya, and then Misty.
Hope this thing's working. Yeah. Okay. I'd also like to speak to that a little bit. The concerns around folks who have, you know, got a home that they worked really hard for, and they're worried about infill and they're worried about density. You know, I empathize with that for sure. I think the points have been made that, you know, we do have to change, we do have to flex, we do have to house everyone. I think that's part of why I brought a charter amendment for town halls for the county council, because I feel like that the importance of every community member hearing other community members and discussing needs is actually vital for us to find compromise. And I think it's much more direct. We need that direct communication between someone who's worked really hard to get that home and is like super happy with their view, and the person struggling to just find a place that has affordable rent that they can actually live in happily and that has enough space for their kids and pets, et cetera. So, you know, I think that number one, that is really key. And I'm really happy to hear that there will be town halls on the jail issue. I think, you know, the more that we can do more community conversations like that, the better. I will say, you know, in terms of permitting and reducing barriers, we have lots of great proposals out there right now. Bellingham is considering a lot of them. I brought forward a sweeping resolution on housing in the Democratic Party that really had a whole bunch, hundreds of policy asks of our lawmakers, and many of those have started to come to fruition, and we're seeing those in our comp plans. So there's, I think, 9 or 10 key things that have been put into a county housing plan. There's a bunch that went into Mayor Lund's plan, and there's even, I think, some of this stuff showed up in the Department of Commerce's plan. So I think what's really exciting for us is that we're having these conversations about how do we reduce the barriers? What are the specific policy things that we do? You know, one of them is parking minimums, and that does have to change. And I can speak from personal experience. You know, my tia, my aunt, wanted to have an ADU, you know, that was sort of grandfathered into her property and formalize it with that new legislation, and, you know, had to like carve out a space of the yard for parking that was like super dumb. It's just a small unit, right? But that had to happen because of the code. Also had to rip out a super innovative, like fancy recycled denim insulation that had, you know, there's been this huge effort to obtain and put in, and it was so cool and it was ecological, you know. And that all had to get ripped out and traditional insulation put in. So I think there are like very specific kinds of barriers that we can remove, whether it's new and innovative materials being allowed, whether it's, you know, getting rid of parking minimums so that there's flexibility for people who want to put in additional units, or so that we don't end up with these massive mall-sized parking lots with far less housing than we could actually put in. We obviously need to take care of ADA issues. We still need to make sure that there's accessible parking. But getting rid of parking minimums is not as scary as it sounds. I know that it sounds scary to a lot of folks, but when we are attending to transit access and we are doing transit-oriented development, I think we can win. I think we can build greater density in a way that folks are not freaked out by. I will also say that, you know, I've been attending some of our planning commission meetings. I attended one recently where there was this idea of like changing the zoning out in Custer. Let's build density in Custer. And, you know, I just brought up, hey guys, you might want to consider that, you know, building density way out in a rural area that is affordable units is not really sustainable. And it's not a best practice to put like poor people out in the middle of a rural place with no transit, no services, no grocery store, et cetera. So, you know, there's all these considerations at play. But I think we're getting there, and I'm excited about that.
Just jump in. I mean, housing touches everything that we've almost been talking about tonight, right? And I think there are solutions, and I think I've said this before in other forums, but the small cities have shown a way to move things through very quickly because as far as streamlining that process with permits, because it is overwhelming and daunting, and investors and contractors are looking at this and saying, I can't wait a year to do a big housing project in Whatcom County. And so they have a system where you're dealing with one or two people in the building and development division. And so that follows that through that relationship to keep things moving. And so I do think that there's some opportunities with the way staffing is for Whatcom County or even in Bellingham, where to keep the process going, because that's where you lose a lot of people that want to invest in housing in Whatcom County, is because of the lengthy process. And the other thing I can think of is, and I agree when we're talking about the urban growth areas, these are areas that have been handpicked for growth. When you start looking at the Growth Management Act, and it's been planning this for years, and that's why every city and the county has this in place, saying, when we expand, when we annex, we take in this chunk of land. And so a lot of it is, by the time you get to that, because it's years down the road, you got to make sure that the zoning allows for density that you need. Maybe it's single family homes, maybe it's an apartment complex. It really depends. But the part about this is having the infrastructure in place, because one of the biggest expenses is having utilities ready to go when you have a development and a developer that comes in and says, I'm ready to build, and you haven't put in the sewer lines, the water lines, the electricity, all of these other things. And so I think we've got to be purposeful about how we plan to do this. And I think the other thing is, when I'm talking about zoning, there's a lot of solutions when you get out into the small cities, because the small cities are adding a lot of housing right now, because Bellingham really isn't. Like, they just had an opportunity to annex new property, which would be allowed to have more housing, with that infrastructure. So I think it's going to take effort from every city and the county to come together and do that. And I'll just say one more thing. I know that this is a long response. The other part of this that we haven't talked about yet is the water adjudication lawsuit. So that is going to affect, I'm a real estate agent by trade. Having no ability to put in wells is a huge thing. I don't know of investors that are going to invest in housing in rural Whatcom County with the lawsuit against well owners, right? So that is going to affect housing, and we haven't even talked about that. It will affect housing, because this lawsuit from the Department of Ecology is saying, and by the way, that's our taxpayer dollars suing all of the well owners, which is just a whole nother thing. But we have to have that in place as well. So that's a big issue, and we're going to have to talk about that because it is tied together.
Make sure that we also touch base when we're talking about affordable housing and our budget constraints, that we're staying really creative, that we're thinking about how to partner with federal, state dollars, as well as the incredible nonprofits in our area, utilizing and investing in land trusts. We had an opportunity to go out and work with Habitat for Humanity this morning, and they shared how important it would also be to be investing in home repairs, because there are a lot of affordable homes out in the county. But if they don't stay repaired and utilizable, then we're building a new home for much more money. And so I think staying really creative, looking at the whole spectrum of options, there's been a lot of good ones mentioned so far, but this is really back to partnership, collaboration, and working together to meet these needs, because it is going to take all of us to make sure we get affordable housing for everybody here.
For us to take a break. We've had a great discussion here. I've had a number of questions from the audience that have come in, and I think I'll wait until we come back before I start with one of those questions. So let's take a quick break now, about 10 minutes. Let's begin with questions from the audience. We have a number of questions that have been focused on this kind of topic. And let me just ask this of each candidate here. Or let's go by race this time, because the question is, what specific topic or topics distinguish you as a candidate from your opponent? So let's start. We have all our candidates, all opponents are sitting together. So let's start at this end. Jessica, what distinguishes you from Kyle?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I have an extensive background in healthcare, and housing is healthcare, and access to services and resources is healthcare. Again, we see all of these social drivers of health, good jobs, ensuring that folks can have safe places to live, have access to the resources that they need for good economic opportunities as well. Those are all pieces that play into that foundation of our health. And it's something that I've seen over and over in my work as a healthcare provider. And I know that the shift from medicine to politics for some doesn't make sense. And for me, it is a direct line because our systems and our policies are what direct our health and our well-being. And I think that's a pretty distinct difference between us.
Kyle?
Yeah, so I would say my experience as mayor for 4 years, and then after that I was a flood recovery manager, which helped pave the way for the funding that we're now receiving for the communities we live in. And then my current role as the director of the Whatcom Long-Term Recovery Group. And our job is to help people rebuild after the floods. So we've done everything from reconstruction, and now we're doing elevations with a lot of federal and state funding. So I would say just my experience. I've spent almost a decade building relationships and working across the aisle. And I think we have to have a collaborative effort. And we're stronger when we come together to look at solutions. And I know sometimes you have to, in those discussions, you might not walk out thinking you win, but sometimes you will have it to where you come out with something that's better for the people and businesses in Whatcom County. So I would just say, you know, I've proven myself, I'm a trusted leader, and I've shown that I'm willing to do the hard things. I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I had during those 3 floods. And I never once said, well, I just need to stop serving the community. And so I'm ready to work hard for people in my district. And I think it helps having public safety. I've been a first responder. Like I said earlier, I was a deputy, been a volunteer firefighter for over 25 years. And so the safety of my community really matters to me. And that's been part of my life and giving back in the community. So yeah, I'd say those are probably the differences between us.
Okay, let's move to District 2. Elizabeth?
Thank you for this question. I think that Maya and I might be very aligned on a lot of the issues, but I think what maybe is a little bit different is just our background and our experience coming into public office. I owned a small business for 20 years. I think those are really important skills that I learned, and learning how to balance the budget, keeping the doors open even when it was a really tough time, taking care of our employees, giving back to our community. Those were incredibly challenging and rewarding 20 years of my life. And during that time, I also spent countless hours in the classroom. I was a PTA president for almost 12 years, and that gave me the ability and the opportunity to get to know people throughout the district, balancing a lot of different needs and trying to figure out how we were going to take care of all kids in our community, regardless of where they lived. And then the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to work on some really important community issues, specifically All Hands Whatcom. We just had our summit last week, and we had 2 days of bringing people together from our community to address really important issues: the opioid crisis, reentry, mental health care. But all of it is about bringing people together to figure out what we can do. How can we care for each other better? I love my work as a board member at the YWCA, where we care for unsheltered women and children, and that has amplified my interest in making sure that everyone has a safe place to sleep at night. So I think it's just we bring different experiences into the room. Thank you.
Maya?
Would you mind restating this question? Would you restate this question?
Oh, yes. What topic or topics distinguishes you as a candidate from your opponent?
Yeah, I think rather than focus on sort of personality or resume factors, I think I would like to talk about topics. I think one of the things that probably really distinguishes me from my opponent is that I'm kind of a policy wonk. I have some serious policy chops. I've been very deeply involved in legislative advocacy for the past 5 years, as well as electoral work. And that has certainly spanned the last 30 years of my life, but not in as much of a directly involved way as I have been. And so that is an experience that's taught me a lot about the actual letter of the law and how policy impacts real people and the ways that our law plays out in everyday folks' lives. So not only do I bring lived experience to that as a worker, as a renter, as someone who comes from a mixed race and ethnicity and multilingual family, as someone who's experienced the immigration system myself directly, who's sponsored an immigrant here and understands what that's like, who's been an immigrant in other countries as a worker and understands what negotiating that is like. I also bring that policy analysis to a lot of what I do in everyday life and in advocacy. So I think I see that as a big difference. I also kind of like, if I zoom out, there is certainly an orientation difference. I think I've approached my policy work and my advocacy work from a place of real lived experience. So rather than being on a management or parent side of the school systems, I'm an educator. I have a master's in teaching, and I've been in the classroom every single day dealing with students directly and dealing with administration and being on the inside of the education experience. Same goes for housing, right? I've been the person struggling to find an affordable rental, to deal with issues with landlords, issues of them not giving me proper notice to come in my house, all of these kinds of things. So I think that is probably what really sets us apart as candidates, is really that orientation and the specific experiences that we bring. So I'm really excited about being a candidate who could serve District 2 from a perspective that so many working class and working families in my district share. And we do not really have that on our county council. We certainly don't have someone who is openly gay. We don't have someone who is, from a mixed race or mixed background on our council. And so I think that's an exciting place to be, to have me running for this seat in a district that I could definitely win, since I won last year. So.
Okay. And moving to the at-large race, Misty, what distinguishes you from Barry as a candidate?
Great question. I would say first and foremost, I would be a newly elected official, so it would be my first time, which I believe will bring some fresh ideas and new leadership. I think sometimes when people are in government positions for a long period of time, they can lose sight of creative solutions when you get stuck on issues. So that would be one thing that I would be bringing that would be different. And then also accountability. I am very involved in engaging with the public on a regular basis, both with my advocacy work, but also as a musician. And I don't know about others here on the panel, but I put my personal phone number in the voters pamphlet because I think that accountability is extremely important, and communication. So I will continue to engage very regularly with each and every one of you, and I encourage you to reach out to me. And I would say that no matter how this race ends, I hope that Barry and I set up some sort of music engagement where we can come and bring to the community what it looks like when people work together with maybe differing ideas. So,
Barry?
Well, I think Misty hit it. Her being new, coming into office, and me having a lot of experience. And I think the experience really does pay off, folks. I think forming not just relationships, but partnerships with our federal partners, with our state partners, to be able to see the bigger picture and how to move things through the system, how to look for grants, how to make those relationships work. And I would say, on the creative side, I understand what she's saying about that, but I think I was a super supporter of the Healthy Children's Fund. That is a creative solution to childcare and early learning in Whatcom County. And I know my opponent and I do differ on that specific issue, but I think the longevity is not a bad thing if you don't sit in your office every single day in the courthouse. You have to get out in the community and talk to people and keep the ideas fresh, because you can't sit and have everything just go stale. You have to be able to move things forward in a creative way and listen to the community, because that's the most important thing.
The largest number of questions that we've had relate to something I mentioned in my first remarks, and that is some of the actions taking place in the other Washington. And I think the question basically boils down to this: what should or could county council do to protect the rights of people in this county from the actions of the current presidential administration? Let's start at the other end with Barry.
Okay, I think the first thing we need to do is support our sheriff, who has policies that he will not cooperate with ICE on just ICE issues. That is not a jurisdictional issue for a Whatcom County sheriff. The Whatcom County sheriff wants to deal with jurisdictional issues that apply to Whatcom County. So the council's supportive of that. I think we can be kind. I think that's one of the biggest things we can do is be kind to one another, whether it be staff people at the counter issuing permits, or whether it be a law enforcement officer on the street, or a council member addressing folks after they've done a public comment or something that they may not agree with. But we have to find that connection with each other that seems to be getting lost in all this rhetoric that's taken place. But we also really need to be supportive of our sheriff's policies. I think that's the best thing we can do right now to protect the rights of those that are being abused by the federal government.
Question, and I can make assumptions on what particular issues on the federal level are affecting us the most. But we do have an amazing community that's very tight-knit, and I believe that there is no issues with us on a local level protecting our people. We also do have the charter, which is our local constitution, and that does guide how our county functions. We also have state-level legislation that protects and insulates us in quite a few ways that on the national level, they might have differences of policy, but we stand firm. For example, on the women's choices for reproductive health. Our state level guides us in a way that's different than the national level, but it does protect us. So when I'm on the campaign trail, I'm often asked about that issue, and it comes back to the local council doesn't have any purview on that, but on the state level, we do have laws that protect those rights. So I would just continue to support our local government and our state government, and I trust that each one of us, if there are real concerns about safety, that we would come together, find creative solutions to protect us all.
So much to say here. What I will say is, I strongly believe that it is the role of government to make sure that everyone in our community, regardless of status, is protected, is safe, is secure, and is not fearful for their lives or their family. I also am really proud to have done a lot of work on this already. I fought very hard for our 2023 My Health, My Data Act, a first of its kind in the nation, Health Data Privacy Act, that protected people's access to abortion and gender-affirming care in our state, specifically immigrant women as well, and have been part of ongoing conversations about how to shore that up, including actually passing those same protections at the county level. We can do that in our municipalities and in our cities so that we are extra firewalled. I also would love to see any and all of the charter amendments that I brought forward and enacted, which expanded our rights provisions of our charter in really time-critical ways. I brought forward a protection of our biometric data, protections so that workers could actually have decision-making power about AI in the workplace, all county workers. There's a bunch of different sort of rights provisions in that, in those amendments that I brought forward, but I'd love to see all of those enacted. And I'd also like to go further. I'd like to see our Whatcom Racial Equity Commission strengthened and really become a venue for people all over our county to actually connect with and reach support, including some type of emergency response network. And I know that our governor has actually just created a sub-cabinet doing that. And so I think there are local things we can do to build on what our governor's actually laid out as a path. The other thing I'd really love to see is for us to get extremely serious about having structured county, I guess, facilitated and probably joint commissioned with our municipality resource centers for immigrants and anyone really targeted by this national administration, with resources, with Know Your Rights. You know, I have my red card in my pocket. I carry it around constantly. The reality is that we are seeing an administration that is going as far as to roll out troops in cities near us, as near as Portland. And we do need to be prepared for that. And we are in a 100-mile border zone where we have less rights than we would if we were not. And so I take this seriously, I have taken it seriously, and I've done quite a lot to try and protect us.
Thank you. I'm glad this question's coming up. Without a doubt, there are so many members of our community that feel like they're under attack. And I think that takes us both as elected leaders, if we're elected, but also as individuals. What does it look like to be aware of people that are feeling like they're under attack or in pain, are scared to show up at school or to get health care? And so I'm grateful for organizations in our community like the food bank deciding, well, if you don't feel safe to come here, we'll come to you. Well, that means we need to make sure we're investing in the food bank. It means to make sure that we're investing in more telehealth possibilities. But overall, I think it's elected leaders play a lot of roles, not just in the policies that they create at the local level, but serving as leaders and serving as champions of people. And I think of my nephew, Max, who has significant disabilities. A lot of his care is under threat. And I'm not okay with that. I don't think any of us are okay with anybody coming and attacking our community members. It's important that we each as individuals think about what's our role in this, both as elected leaders, as community members, as neighbors and friends. I really hope that we're all thinking about investing in our local nonprofits that are helping support LGBTQ community. Sorry, it was too many letters and no breath left. Sorry about that. I apologize. I was speaking too much without breathing. But all of our marginalized communities, our immigrant communities, there's so many wonderful nonprofits that are supporting our communities that we just need to do everything we can as both community members and elected leaders. And I specifically think about our LGBTQ plus communities, our immigrants, and our folks with disabilities. So I would just say, anyway, that's enough for today, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would say, and I think it was said here, and I agree, as a county council member, there really isn't legislation you can do that would supersede, the state level that we've already talked about. So again, I think the biggest thing to focus on here is we want our communities to be safe, and we want to make sure that everything's done legally. And I think, if there is any enforcement, is making sure that it's done in a way that isn't breaking any laws. And like I said, I think the biggest thing is, as a county council member, I don't see how there would be any legislation you can use to change or supersede that. From my experience in law enforcement, understanding how that works, it just wouldn't be, relevant to a decision-making thing at this office. But again, I want to just restate, as long as it's legal, I don't support any illegal law enforcement actions. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, a few thoughts. One is there have been a lot of things that were legal in the United States that are no longer legal, and I think all of us in this room would disagree with those things. The other is the whole reason I stepped up into this role is because I was concerned about what I was seeing. I was really worried looking at the news. I didn't know, what could I do to help? What could I do to protect my community members? And there's a lot of ways that we can all do that, whether it's stepping into a role of civic duty, whether it's looking out for our neighbors. I want to touch on, the one thing that Mr. Buchanan said was around the Keep Washington Working Act. I'm really grateful to have the endorsement of Sheriff Tanksley, and he is dedicated to following those boundaries on how local governments can interact with the federal immigration enforcement. And I really want to support him in following that law and promote the work of his office. He's talked about how we've seen an increase in domestic violence because of the fear of immigrants in our community, where they're afraid to call for help. We have to stand up and protect them. This is about rights and responsibilities. What are my rights and how hard am I fighting for them? And what do I feel like my responsibility is to fight for someone else's right? Where can I stand up and use my privilege to make somebody else stronger? So that's massive to me. There's so much that we can do. And then one other thing that was mentioned about, what we could do at the county level versus what is at the state level. The county council is not just about budgets and land use. We also serve as the Board of Health, and that means we set policy for the health department. I believe women must have the right to make their own reproductive decisions. And in these times, we have seen women across the country lose that freedom with really tragic consequences. We have seen miscarriages that have been turned into medical crises, families making these really impossible decisions. And if you don't trust women to make their own medical decisions, you shouldn't be in charge of public health. I will always fight for women's reproductive rights, for access to healthcare, and for policies that support healthy families across our strong communities. Thank you.
Okay. Ron, shall I turn this back to you now?
At your peril, yes. We are going to have a lightning round here at some point that I think will be very insightful in learning marginally trivial information about the candidates. We can do that now, or I can go to another serious issue. Lightning round, okay. Boyle says lightning round. Okay, so we can get through this quickly because I'm just going to ask you to show of hands, right? Now, you're not under oath, but you are being recorded, and we do have ways to check these things out, and I'm keeping score, so just keep that in mind. So, and I also want to acknowledge that many of these questions, the credit or blame for them come from our reporters in the newsroom who responded to my plea for questions. So raise your hand if you possess a current valid Bellingham or Whatcom County library card. Okay, we get this on film? Okay, got that, Finn?
You can use mine, Barry.
Barry, just saying. Okay. Sorry, I know it's probably not fair, but
We should have asked who had children that also.
that's a good point. Raise your hand if you have children.
We'll have a cat.
Okay, so children. Okay.
I motion with the library card that your children may have inspired the library card.
Yeah.
See, now you're muddying the issue in a political way. Raise your hand if your current home or place of residence has a natural gas stove or water heater. Interesting.
Out of my control. Sorry.
Raise your hand if you've ever purchased anything using Bitcoin. Oh, thank God. This big restores some of my faith in humanity, and Whatcom County in particular. Raise your hand if you or anyone in your household own or use an electric vehicle on a regular basis.
Yeah, hybrid.
Not yet.
Ooh. Wow, okay.
Electric bike.
No. That does get to the next question, though. Raise your hand if you've ever negotiated and survived the bike lanes on Holly Street. A couple yeses, all right.
Never tried it.
That is impressive, I have to say, an act of courage. Raise your hand, this is important, if you have voted in every one of the last 4 primary and general elections. Okay. Got that down, Isaac? Raise your hand if you currently own a cat or a dog. Whew. You can stay in town then. Okay, bonus round. Raise your hand if you can quickly and succinctly tell me how to tell the difference between a wild and hatchery-produced coho salmon.
Oh, gosh.
Anyone? Kyle?
Yeah, I would have a fin clipped.
Wow.
And which fin would that be?
That wasn't the question. I don't remember.
That would be the adipose fin. Okay, well, that's pretty good. See, and I think that people deserve to get to know you all as people. So the last question is, what is your Netflix password? And could you please speak very slowly? No, just kidding. Okay, so we've dispensed with that. We can move on to some other serious topics. One of them is, and we skirted this a little bit, we talked about public safety in general with regard to people's civil rights and arrests and things like that, but I'd like to ask about emergency preparedness. The other major role that the county does play is in public safety. And I'm curious whether each of you or any of you who want to speak to this question feels like, is Whatcom County really prepared for a major emergency? And by that, I do not mean the 100-year flood that comes every 3 years. Major if you're in it, yes, absolutely. I'm not trying to downplay that. But is the county prepared for the possible big Cascade Foothills wildfire that we could have, and a lot of people stuck with one road to get out? And is it prepared for the other thing that we were joking about this before, in the back room how I never mentioned to people who are interviewing for jobs at CDN about the big 9/0 earthquake until they're already here. And then I mentioned, did I mention the big 9/0 earthquake? And they go, what? So that's a serious emergency, right? We're going to go without power for weeks, months, forever. Is the county prepared for those big emergencies? And if not, what should it do immediately to get ready? Barry raised his hand first.
So that's a great question. You remember, a month and a half or 2 months ago when we had the big tsunami alert? And I had a couple of constituents call and ask, are we ready for the tsunami? And, I decided it was time to have a really frank conversation with the community about how prepared are we? So I've asked the sheriff and the Department of Emergency Management to put together a presentation for the council, and hopefully they're going to have that ready. I asked them back in September to talk about wildfires, to talk about tsunamis, to talk about those kind of things that require evacuation routes. What are the evacuation routes, let's say from Sudden Valley? That's a tricky place to evacuate. One road in, one road out. So I'm hoping that not only the sheriff and the Department of Emergency Management, but we'll have fish and wildlife there. It's going to be a very informative presentation, and I will make sure that you at Cascadia get the date that that's going to take place. Because I think it's important that we start talking about what does the mutual aid look like, for instance? How do agencies work together, state, federal, and local? How do we, and again, I mentioned evacuation routes. We have some clear tsunami signage here and there, but I have never seen anything talking about, volcanoes. There's another one to add to your 9/0 list. Yeah. If a volcano blows, we've studied that and what some of those material flows would be. They'd be dangerous. They'd come all the way to Bellingham. So we need to really have frank conversations about that and find out exactly how ready we are.
Well, I wanted to weigh in on this and then.
Yeah, I just, I happen to have also, with that whole tsunami warning, talked with our CERT coordinator and then had follow-up conversations running into them at Birchwood International Market where we talked a little bit about, hey, how do I get information, right? Like, do my neighbors all know what to do? And then as we spoke, there was this sort of I had all of these questions about evacuations, which neighborhoods are gonna be affected, where do they go, what happens? I'm so glad to hear the county is gonna do that. But some of my other questions were about, what about people without, access to these meetings or information? What about my unhoused neighbors? What about folks who need a different language? I personally don't feel that we're where we need to be. And I would love for us to, do everything you described and more. And I would also love for us to work with our municipalities and our neighborhood organizations to make sure that we're actually setting up that mutual aid coordination, phone trees, whatever it may be within neighborhoods as well, so that we can reach as many people as possible with that info. Also, fun fact, I do have wildland firefighter certified training from my teens, but I think I remember most of it. If you're my neighbor, you will benefit.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're definitely unprepared when it comes to emergency response, and I agree that we need to have evacuation routes sooner than later. I also think that CERT training is really valuable. I have quite a few friends in my circle that did that training just so that they could be more prepared for emergencies and be able to show up and help on the scene. I also would love to see some integration of emergency response and even CPR and first aid brought to our schools and encouraging our students to get free training that really helps prepare them, because I think that the more of us that have understanding on how to respond in emergencies, the better. I also think that we could really be utilizing our fire departments and encouraging volunteer support and training so that not only do they have extra folks they can call on in an emergency around fires, but it also does increase that first aid and CPR training. It's been a big concern of mine when we started to really see the huge opioid crisis pick up, that there were not enough people that really knew how to respond to an overdose. And I heard time and time again that people that were on the streets were trying to resuscitate people that were overdosed, but they didn't quite even know how to do it, and sometimes people were getting hurt, and it's always with the best intentions. So I think that the more that we can really train out people on how to respond to different types of emergencies and bring it to our students, the better. So thank you for that question.
So I would just add, this is definitely in my wheelhouse with my experience as mayor and as first responder for years. And there is a lot that we've learned after the really big flood, the November 21 flood, where 600 families, well, it was over 600 families reported damage. And that was throughout the whole county. That wasn't, people think of it as just the Nooksack Valley. We've learned a lot from that, and I think we went through a lot of stages talking about pre-planning. And I think the biggest thing is actually getting the right people in the room. And a good example of this would be on Friday, there was council member John Scanlon was there. There was every year there's an annual winter storm briefing for all of the agencies, whether that's fire, EMS, police, and a lot of the national and state organizations like WSDOT and NOAA. And every year they get together and have a good winter storm briefing before the winter season and talk about that collaboration about what the agencies are doing. And I think something we can do is take that even farther. Like every city or the county itself has a lot of pre-planning and what to do in this kind of an emergency, but we can do a lot better. And I agree with like the CPR and first aid training. And I think the question about are we ready for a big disaster, and there's steps we can take, but to be honest, it's every single community would be isolated, and so in a big disaster, so you would really have to have that happen at a micro level and really have like neighborhoods or smaller cities or even sections of Bellingham to really work together and understand what that would look like in a big emergency, because there's not a lot you can do, and I think people say, well, we just need to plan more, but it all happens at that smaller level. And I think that's something we can improve on, because we have a lot of good agencies and first responders and other things like that where they have their own plan, but there's not a lot going out to the community members on what they do. And so I do think it's important and it's valuable. And I think it just comes down to making it real for people, because in a big emergency, the idea of you call 911 and people are coming, that's just not the case. If you're isolated, you need community members, and the CERT is a good example, or just having that pre-plan done. We do it as government agencies and nonprofit organizations. We just need to roll that out into neighborhoods, because if something big happens, it's going to be everybody helping each other. So it's an important issue. So I'm glad we're talking about it. Jessica?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to mention I was one of those 600 people displaced from my home. And this was not during the first of the 3 floods that was mentioned. We are not doing a good enough job alerting people of the hazards at hand. So thinking about, we have this tsunami warning that I think all of us heard from around the county. How can we be alerting people of the dangers that are coming? How can we give them the autonomy to make the preparations that they need so that these neighbors can be working together and can be utilizing these systems to best take care of one another? So even really simple steps like, here is this alarm, or here is this noise, and it would cross language barriers, it would wake you up in the middle of the night so the water doesn't have to, and make sure that we're actually giving people what they can use to do the best in a situation that's already really impossible. Thank you.
Elizabeth, did you want to weigh in on this? Sure.
Had such great responses, and certainly we have the professionals to really lead this effort. But I do want to mention something I heard several of you say, both Maya and Kyle, about our communities, and how the civic engagement can really be transformational in a moment of crisis. Several years ago, my husband and I hosted a series of potlucks with a purpose. It might sound a little cheesy, but we invited neighbors and community members to gather together to learn about issues that we thought that we wanted to learn about. And one of those was emergency preparedness, because we recognize that in an emergency, we're all going to be relying on each other. We want to make sure that we're in a place that we can care for our neighbor and the neighbor next to them. And so I think a lot of work, we can turn to the government for a lot lot of answers, certainly. They can hold a lot of the financial resources. But then also I want to make sure that we're creating structures that encourage people to be actively engaged in the answer as well. And so things like encouraging neighborhood preparedness, making sure that people are speaking the same way, like all these different things that we can do to encourage. So in that moment, your neighbor's going to be the answer. And we need to make sure we're all ready to care for each other.
Those are great answers, thanks. The other issue that I mentioned earlier, there's some issues that come up every year in our citizens agenda process, and one of those is healthcare and general public health, I think, has taken a new place on the stage since the COVID pandemic. And the county has a vital role in public health, as anybody who's served on the county council or watched it in action goes, and particularly with regard to the power of public health boards, which is an interesting situation in Whatcom County. We at the newspaper hear a lot from people who seem to be on a spectrum of a little bit angry or really, really angry about choices for healthcare in this county and this region. And I know that the county council has limited ability to affect that, but what steps can the county take through public health measures, education, other things to give those people a little bit of relief to feel like that their health is being considered and cared for? Anybody want to take that on? Jessica?
Yeah, thank you. This is a great question, and something actually that on the campaign trail I've been learning a lot about, because I hear similarly, as you mentioned, these concerns and fears about what's not there. And I have found really in a surprising and kind of hopeful way how much is getting done. The more time I've spent out in East County, we have a mobile dental clinic that now comes out and travels through. We have several mobile medical clinics that are now coming out at a sliding scale or no cost to those who cannot afford it. So really learning about these individual programs, whether it be nonprofit, whether it be seeking grant funding, but making sure that we're not leaving these in little siloed areas, but that we're getting everybody together, that everybody knows where to access these resources, and that we're strengthening and building this incredible work that these community champions are doing. Because it's not something that we alone as a council can do, but we can strengthen and empower the incredible work that the community is doing, taking care of one another.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Barry?
Yeah, I think, there's a report that the health department does. It's called the Community Health Improvement Program, and there's a community health assessment that looks at our community in census tracts, so they can look at very small slices of the county and get economic data, they can get health data, they can get a lot of a snapshot of what our community looks like as far as public health goes. So those two reports are super, super important. The other thing we're going through right now is there's a lot of discussion in council right now about what does a health board look like? What would a configuration under new state law that allows for healthcare professionals to be on the health board? And what that would amount to is if we choose to go down that route, no more than half of the board can be elected officials, and the other portion are healthcare providers and other disciplines that the council will choose when that health board is formed. So no decisions have been made on that. I was a little questionable on it at first, but I found out that there would be no spending authority with a reconfigured health board, and that was one of my concerns is how would the council then compete with dollars, general fund dollars, with a health board? And that didn't seem to line up for me, but to find out that there's no spending authority there, that the council would be still the budget authority on all issues. So I think those are a couple things that are going on that the community can feel good about.
We asked most candidates this question in our CDN Citizens Agenda interview, and I think there was a consensus that everybody felt that there needs to be more professional expertise on the health board. Is there anybody who doesn't agree with that on the stage? Okay, yeah. Do you want to speak to that, Maya?
I agree with it, but I also want to say that I additionally feel there should be people with lived experience of barriers to care that are sort of members of that board, and whether that's on a per multiple meetings on particular issues, right, basis, or whether that's coming to every meeting. But I really strongly believe in stipending that participation and making sure that folks with lived experience have a voice in that board. because I think it's one thing to do that data analysis from sort of a top-down perspective. I think it's really important to do a bottom-up as well.
That's a really good point. Misty?
Yeah, I would say that I definitely agree with her as far as having the health board be as most diverse as possible as far as lived experience and otherwise, because when it comes to health is a personal decision, how we manage our health, but when it comes to how the health department manages public health, I think that the more people that are at the table, the better. I will say too that going around the county, a lot of the smaller rural areas are definitely lacking in their ability to get to healthcare access. And when we were up in Point Roberts, that was a major topic, that they do have one small clinic, but it is really priced out for people that have private insurance. So I think that if anything that the council is doing to bring forth more healthcare access, we need to make sure that it's actually accessible to everybody and not just people with certain insurances that would allow them to access it without it being these exorbitant rates.
Good.
Yeah, I would agree with what Misty said on there. In Linden, they just got a urgent care clinic just recently, and the feedback that I've received is so good, even in Linden, because now people that have trouble with transportation needs don't have to drive down to Bellingham. So I really feel there is an opportunity, especially in the rural area of Northeast Whatcom County, to maybe put in a urgent care or some kind of a facility to be able to help people in that area, because I agree, if you talk to people as you're out door knocking, a lot of people aren't as ambulatory, or they don't have a ride, or they're relying on the bus. And so there's a lot of limitations to get them to services in Bellingham or even Linden now. So it's like, I do feel like this is something we can do a better job at. And just because it's accessible for maybe all of us in this room, there's other people where it's not accessible. And so I think it's important to ask that question. I think there's a lot of data that would support, having that, something in that part of the county. The other part is, and I think Jessica mentioned this, which the Habitat for Humanity volunteer thing we did this morning, one of the ladies on my team is actually with the ministry, and they do, it's healthcare, and she does go around and do that mobily. And, mobily, is that a word? Sure. Mobile. It is now. It's mobile. So, but I think those are the kind of solutions we're going to need, because what might fit for people that live in this town might not work for all of Whatcom County. So I'm glad we're having this discussion. And one other thought I would have on the, where Barry mentioned like healthcare professionals coming to, that committee, I think that's important. Just one thought I would have is making sure there's term limits, and maybe that you're not just having somebody come in and stay on there for 20 years. The nice thing about having the Whatcom County Council members part of the health board is, voters have a chance to elect and vote for people. So that would just be my only concern with that, is making sure somebody just doesn't come in and stay. I mean, how would that look? I just want to make sure that there's accountability, to the voters, whatever that would look like.
I think we're running out of time here. I wanted to just, before I sign off, say thank you to all you candidates. This has been a really engaging conversation. And one of the privileges of being a journalist is to be able to sit down with these people who are trying to improve our communities and ask them direct questions. And we hope that these forums will give you a chance to feel some of that same privilege. So thank you so much for this conversation. It's been excellent. We will also, I'll remind folks too that a huge product of our own work covering the election, which we provide for free to the community as part of our civic mission, is comes to fruition in our big voter guide, which I jokingly refer to as the Sears catalog voter guide because it's thick, and that's coming out in your papers and on newsstands on October 17th. So look for that. It's very comprehensive. It'll have direct answers to your reader questions from these candidates in 50 words or less, which is, I know, a punishing thing to do to a candidate. And we sort of enjoy that, actually. It's a torture test, right? And a rite of passage. So anyway, thank you. And Dean, I hand to you.
What a great discussion. What a great audience. What great candidates. This town hall is free, and that's only possible because of the generous support that we receive from you, from the community. So thank you, those of you who subscribe to Cascadia Daily News. And let me remind you all that the best way to support local newspapers is to subscribe to one. So I invite you to join us in making an investment in this community by buying a subscription, making a donation. If you're interested, you can chat with our audience engagement editor, Alana Markham, who will be at the desk outside the auditorium. If you enjoyed this evening's event, we have another one next week. Candidates for Bellingham City Council races will be here to discuss housing, government accountability, public safety issues. Same time, same place, next Saturday. At Cascadia Daily News, we are dedicated to holding events like this and getting out in the community to meet you. So to that end, coming up in November, we're hosting a meet and greet in the Sudden Valley neighborhood. You'll get a chance to meet our reporters and staff. Tell us what you think the community needs to know about Sudden Valley. That'll be at the Barn Dance on Wednesday, the Barn Dance in Sudden Valley, Dance Barn in Sudden Valley on November 12th from 5 to 7 p.m. More information on cascadia.com. Finally, I'd like to thank Seaholm High School and the Bellingham School District, and especially Laura McGowan, for all their help. Most importantly, thanks to all the candidates who joined us. You make extraordinary personal sacrifices to run for office. And it's that dedication to public service, along with effective local media coverage, that makes democracy work. So thank you, candidates. The Mariners are tied with the Tigers 2-2 in the top of the 8th, and good night to all.